Hey folks, before we dive in, don't forget to follow S News for more in-depth reporting like this. If you want to support us, please subscribe, hit that like button and drop a comment below. It really helps us keep bringing you the stories that matter. Russia uses Ukrainian military base as launchpad for deeper invasion. On July 27, 2025, the Russian army launched a massive attack from a base they had seized inside Ukraine years ago. They used 50 tanks, 30 armored vehicles, and 70 suicide drones. It was a high-tech blitz designed to punch through Ukrainian defenses. But what the Russians didn't know was they were being watched closely. As their tanks moved forward, they rolled right into a massive minefield, an area 3 square miles wide, packed with over 4,200 anti-tank mines hidden beneath dirt roads and farmland. But Ukraine's plan almost fell apart when one of their own trucks nearly set off the mines. If that had happened, the entire trap could have exploded prematurely and been wasted. Would Ukraine's plan work?
The stakes couldn't have been higher. One mistake, and months of planning would have gone up in smoke.
At exactly 6:40 a.m. on July 27, 2025, satellite images revealed a huge Russian armored column moving out from previously seized Ukrainian bases in the Donetsk region, territory occupied since early 2023. This wasn't a recon patrol, it was an invasion force. 50 T-90 tanks, 30 armoured troop carriers, and over 700 infantry soldiers pushed west in tight formation. Leading the charge were 70 drones, not for surveillance but for destruction. These were kamikaze drones, programmed to seek out Ukrainian positions and blow up on impact, clearing the way for the tanks behind them. Each drone carried a powerful warhead strong enough to tear through concrete bunkers.
What made the attack even more dangerous was the strategy. If a drone met resistance or radar interference, it would self-destruct immediately, and that was considered acceptable. For the first time since the original invasion in 2022, Russia had launched a fully integrated mechanized assault, combining tanks, infantry, and loitering munitions. Ukrainian generals monitoring radar screens realized this wasn't just another skirmish. It was a calculated attempt to break through their front line before the fall. Western analysts were stunned. The estimated cost of that single assault wave was over $350 million in vehicles, munitions, and drone systems. The Kremlin was making a bold, expensive gamble. If it worked, it could erase months of Ukrainian defensive gains. But Ukraine wasn't caught off guard. Deep underground, something even more devastating had already been prepared.
As the Russian tanks roared toward what they believed was an exposed Ukrainian flank, they had no idea they were heading straight into a deadly trap, carefully designed over weeks. Following orders from General Mykola Shevchenko, Ukraine's 93rd Mechanized Brigade turned 3 square miles of farmland into a hellish death zone filled with mines. More than 4,200 anti-tank mines were buried under fresh soil and crops, arranged in overlapping patterns to delay, confuse, and destroy. But it wasn't just a physical trap, it was psychological too. Narrow lanes were left open on purpose to trick Russian drivers into what seemed like safe paths, only for them to trigger pressure-sensitive mines hidden beneath. Within just 4 minutes, 17 Russian tanks were blown apart, torn into twisted metal, their turrets launched 50 feet into the air.
What made the ambush so effective wasn't just the engineering, it was the timing. Ukrainian drones hovered overhead, watching every move and feeding live updates to commanders on the ground. At the perfect moment, they activated electronic triggers to maximize destruction. Still, not everything went smoothly. One Ukrainian field unit misread the coordinates and almost drove a supply truck right into their own minefield. The driver slammed the brakes just 2 meters from the edge. If it weren't for a last-second radio warning from a drone operator, it could have triggered a chain reaction that ruined the entire trap. It was a chilling reminder. Even the best defenses can collapse from within. But that day, Ukraine held the line, and Russia, charging recklessly across open ground, was now bleeding metal, fuel, and men, right into a battlefield that had just rewritten the rules of modern ground warfare. Just as smoke was still rising from the wreckage of Russian vehicles in the minefield, Ukraine launched the second wave of its defense, but this time the attack didn't come from underground. It came across the horizon. At At 7:15 in the morning, Ukraine's 12th Armoured Assault Battalion launched a three-pronged counterattack from hidden positions west of the explosion zone. 32 T-84 Oplot tanks rolled out, backed by 10 self-propelled artillery units and mobile anti-aircraft platforms, all moving in perfect coordination. The ground shook. Ukrainian tank crews had waited for this moment, driven by months of attrition and now powered by real-time battlefield intel. The Russian tanks retreat, but Ukraine strikes back. The surviving Russian tanks quickly turned their turrets and began to pull back from the minefield. But the Ukrainian armoured units were already charging in, moving at top speed, about 45 miles per hour, guns blazing. In the first 90 seconds, 9 more Russian tanks were hit and destroyed in direct strikes. Their crews didn't stand a chance. Above them, the air exploded with noise. The remaining Russian suicide drones, which hadn't already detonated in the failed advance, dived toward the incoming Ukrainian armour in a last-ditch effort to salvage the mission. But this time, Ukraine was ready. Each Ukrainian column had Shkval 6 rotary guns mounted on its flanks, multi-barrel anti-aircraft cannons capable of firing 4,000 rounds per minute. Like spinning saw blades of death, they shredded the sky. Drone after drone exploded mid-air, some as close as 30 feet above the tank turrets. The sound was deafening, a chaos of engine roars, cannon fire and flying debris. In less than 4 minutes, 47 out of the remaining 53 Russian drones were shot down. The rest veered off course or crashed into empty fields, jammed by Ukrainian electronic warfare systems that flooded the airwaves with fake GPS signals. Meanwhile, from a ridge 600 meters to the east, Ukrainian howitzers opened fire, targeting the retreating edges of the Russian force. The strikes were so precise they blew up supply vehicles and even hit medics trying to rescue the wounded.
They walked straight into hell. We didn't even have to chase them, we just lit the fuse.
By 7:31 in the morning, less than 20 minutes after the Russian spearhead entered the kill zone, the entire front line had flipped. Russian forces had gone from invaders to fleeing targets, but Ukraine wasn't done yet. The final blow. High-resolution drone footage spotted a Russian command vehicle among the wreckage. It was still transmitting encrypted orders to the remaining infantry. This vehicle was the nerve center of the entire operation. What happened next would shake the Russian command structure to its core. With Russian tanks burning and their drone fleet decimated, the battlefield chaos gave way to something far more precise. At 7:35 in the morning, with the spearhead paralyzed, 850 Ukrainian infantry troops began to move. They weren't ordinary soldiers, they were divided into 7 strike teams, made up of elite snipers, anti-tank specialists and electronic warfare units. Hidden in pre-dug trenches, abandoned farms and dense tree lines around the kill zone, they had been lying silently in wait. The mission was codenamed Operation Frost Hook. The goal was simple: strike once the enemy is disoriented. Don't give them time to regroup. As the surviving Russian infantry climbed out of their damaged vehicles looking for cover, Ukraine's strike teams kicked into action. Dozens of RPG-29 launchers fired in rapid succession, targeting command trucks and troop carriers. One direct hit ignited an ammo truck, sending a fireball 3 stories high and scattering hot shrapnel across a 100-yard radius. At the same time, snipers with thermal scopes picked off Russian squad leaders trying to rally their troops. In under 6 minutes, over 110 Russian soldiers were killed or wounded. The rest began to scatter. Some ran into the woods, others dropped their weapons and crawled to safety. But there was nowhere to go. Earlier, Ukraine's 3rd Airborne Recon Unit had already circled behind the Russian advance via underground drainage tunnels. They had sealed off every possible escape route. When Russian troops tried to flee, they ran straight into another wall of gunfire. Then came the moment no one expected. Near the southern tree line, inside a barely functioning communications vehicle, Ukrainian forces found a wounded man in full Russian officer gear. He was surrounded by maps, satellite equipment, and a torn insignia patch. Biometric scans confirmed his identity. Colonel Viktor Sionovich, commander of Russia's 42nd Armored Regiment, a key figure in Moscow's southern military strategy.
I had tried to disguise myself as a wounded conscript, but, well, a sharp-eyed Ukrainian sergeant noticed something odd. My clean boots and the military-grade GPS device. That's not the kind of gear any frontline grunt would carry.
Within minutes, the colonel was restrained, patched up, and flown out under armed guard. The capture was a massive breakthrough. He had encrypted drives, combat orders for the next 72 hours, and detailed plans of Russia's fallback positions. Ukrainian intelligence later called it the most valuable capture since 2023. By 8:05 a.m., just 85 minutes after the attack began, Russia's entire operation had collapsed. 42 Russian vehicles destroyed, over 200 troops killed or captured. Their commanding officer was now a prisoner. Ukraine hadn't just survived. They had crushed a superior mechanized force using tactics that blended 20th century courage with 21st century precision. By 8:10 a.m., what had started as Russia's most aggressive push in 6 months had honestly turned into their worst one-day ground defeat since the war began. The minefield that swallowed their tanks, the drones shot out of the sky, and the ambush that routed their infantry. Together, these things created a disaster that honestly even surprised Ukrainian commanders.
Satellite imagery confirmed the aftermath. 42 armoured vehicles destroyed, 14 more abandoned, over 230 Russian troops killed or captured, including one regimental commander. The tip of Russia's 42nd Armoured Regiment was neutralized in under 90 minutes.
Moscow was silent. No public statement, no press conference. But, Western intelligence quickly reported that several high-ranking Russian officers were placed under investigation. Rumors began to spread that the capture of Colonel Sionovich had exposed major flaws in Russia's southern strategy, and even some internal power struggles among field commanders. Despite the success, Ukraine didn't celebrate loudly. In Mykolaiv military hospital, medics treated both Ukrainian and Russian wounded.
A Ukrainian corporal who had fought in the ambush was photographed offering water to a captured 19-year-old Russian conscript clearly shaken, with burns on his face from a nearby explosion. That image went viral. Because honestly, in the middle of all the precision strikes, thermal optics and AI-driven warfare, this was still a war fought by people. Sons, fathers, neighbors. Victory was clear, but the cost was still felt.
In Washington, I commented during a live interview. This wasn't just a military win. It was a case study in discipline, planning, and humanity. Ukraine didn't win because it had more weapons. It won because it had more restraint. Instead of leveling the battlefield with missiles, Ukraine waited. They let Russia overextend, then struck with precision, using the terrain, timing, and local knowledge to do maximum damage with minimum loss. But the final lesson wasn't just military, it was moral.
During interrogation, I reportedly said, "I never saw it coming. Your people fought like ghosts, not out of rage but out of resolve."
And that resolve, the defense of home, not conquest, is what drove Ukraine's resistance. It was the same spirit seen in soldiers from Normandy to Fallujah. Not blind aggression, but the wisdom to outthink your enemy and mercy when others would seek revenge. The battlefield went quiet that evening, but what happened that day will be studied in military academies for decades. July 27th, 2025 wasn't just a military ambush, it was a lesson in modern warfare, resilience, and moral clarity. Ukraine, outnumbered and facing high-tech assault, didn't retreat. They planned, they waited, and when the moment came, they struck with precision, turning Russia's most confident offensive into a historic failure. In just 85 minutes, Ukraine neutralized an entire armored regiment, captured hundreds, and seized the very officer carrying Moscow's future plans. Russia lost more than vehicles or men. They lost intelligence, momentum, and perhaps most of all, their sense of invincibility. But the greatest win might not have been seen on satellite images. It was the victory of principles over brutality. While missiles flew and drones fell from the sky, Ukraine didn't seek revenge, they chose strategy. They spared civilians, treated enemy wounded, and showed compassion to frightened conscripts. Because in the end, this cruel, brutal war is still fought by humans, some misled, others defending home, and Ukraine reminded the world of a truth often forgotten. Real strength isn't firepower, It's the wisdom to use it with restraint and the heart to see humanity even in your enemy. Finally, thank you for listening and being with us through this story. If you found this meaningful, please follow S News for more updates and don't forget to subscribe, like and comment. We appreciate your support and we hope to see